As we are all dealing with this Wuhan coronavirus pandemic stuff, the question becomes, how much government do we want in our lives in all this time? And you know me, I don't like government getting too involved in our lives. Does that change during something like this? I want to welcome to the show, and I'm very, very excited that he's made time for us today. Pete Earle is an economist with the American Institute for Economic Research. And Pete, good morning. Welcome to Philadelphia.
Morning, Rich. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I loved your piece. South Korea preserved the open society, and now infection rates are falling. So I guess the question becomes, as we hear all these governors talking about potential curfews and lockdowns and everything else, the approach of a country like South Korea, the exact opposite of that, and it worked for them, right?
Yeah, and I cited some statistics in the article, and I checked last night and this morning, and those trends are continuing. The same thing is going on, so it's still working. That to me vindicates their approach.
So what did they do? What was their approach in South Korea to deal with the coronavirus outbreak?
So one of the things is that the Korean Center for Disease Control didn't have the tremendous levels of red tape and other regulatory fetters that the FDA and the Center for Disease Control have. And so what that let them do is start producing tests very quickly by the tens of thousands. And once they had the ability to do that, they set up drive-through testing stations all around the country, through which individuals, after a short test, would find out within a few hours. And then they only quarantined people who were sick. They didn't clamp off huge population centers, as is starting to happen in the U.S. and has happened in Italy and China. And in Italy, which is a great controlled experiment because in many ways it's similar to Korea, the results have been the opposite. By far, the crisis is getting worse there.
So the idea then is that people will make, as we believe, I think with all these circumstances, people will make the right choices. People will make the best decisions, and then that will be how we get through this. But I'm seeing a lot of limits on items in grocery stores. They're talking about now in my state of Pennsylvania, where I'm broadcasting from, they're going to close restaurants. We'll only be allowed to do takeout only. It seems like that's going to lead to more people going to the grocery stores now, and you're going to have even more crowds at grocery stores, not less. It just sounds some ways like there's so many unintended consequences for a lot of these policies.
So this is going to be the theater of the unexpected over the next 6 months. There's three major stories here, right? One is the inevitable effects of red tape and just bureaucracy's gone amok. The superior of decentralized local solutions versus centralized solutions, which is to say the superior of bottom-up rather than top-down solutions. And as you mentioned, it's the test of our commitment to liberty, to freedom, comes during emergencies. You know, the other day in Jersey City, they announced that they were going to close bars and restaurants at 10 p.m. And I know when I was 22, all I would have done is got there an hour earlier. These are ridiculous solutions. Right. I mean, these things are not going to help. Well, with less obstacles to getting these tests out, doing research, we would have been able to clamp this thing down much sooner. And it's disappointing that the U.S., which is a great nation with a great history and a great commitment to freedom, which seems to be waning over time, is really following the example of China instead of, say, South Korea and other nations which are utilizing markets and private property rights and that sort of thing.
I was very pleased to see the president bring out CEOs Friday night and the talk about getting rid of the red tape that has held up these private testing, the private testing and that from occurring. I was very happy to hear that. One of the big lessons for me anyway in all this, Pete, is that the roadblocks that were in place back in January when this first started to peak in the United States, first cases came out, that can never happen again. I think the federal government, hopefully under this administration, has learned that lesson.
Yeah, I hope so. What I was thinking the other day is that maybe we need a sort of a DEFCON level for moving aside bureaucrats during crises, that sort of thing, because we've definitely seen over time, just as we saw during Hurricane Sandy and also Katrina, when the government can't do something, Walmart gets it done. Think of the difference between, say, Amazon.com, which gets me my mail sometimes within 24 hours, or gets me a package within 24 hours, and the post office, which takes 3 days for a letter to get to me. I mean, the writing's on the wall. It's all very clear. It's just a question of, bureaucratic inertia. But luckily, this administration and some others in the past have tried to harness, that which makes the market superior, which is, again, the bottom-up rather than top-down method of gathering information and acting on it.
Pete Earle joins me. Pete is an economist with the American Institute for Economic Research. He's also an author and a professor. Follow him on Twitter at L1KNB. Did I get that right? At L1KNB? I got that right. I think so.
That's right. Let 1,000 nations bloom.
I love it. Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, who is no fan of the private sector, he's talking about having the federal government now nationalize various segments of the economy during this crisis. To me, I think that'd be one of the biggest mistakes we could ever make.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a terrible mistake, but none of this should surprise any of us. There's a saying, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And for some of these politicians, when all you have is a hammer, everything begins to look like a sickle.
Right, hammer and sickle. Very, very good point. So it worked in South Korea. What exactly, in terms of being able to test people, for example, if we could speed up the testing, then you could test people and then say, okay, you're clear, so go to a restaurant, go out to dinner, go enjoy yourself, and then we'd be able to then better isolate who's sick and who's not. But how does that work without government doing the isolation, for example?
Yeah. So what you would do is you would perhaps this would be a time. Now none of these are superior or none of these are optimal solutions. All of them involve some sort of sacrifices. But the South Korean way has been superior. What I would envision is somebody gets tested, and if you're positive, you might instead, as they've done in Korea, sort of deputize. I mean, you don't even need to deputize. Private property rights are there. Restaurant owners could either say, all right, if you've been tested, I want to see, the app. Or I want to see, for the next few weeks, I want to see the card that says that you're cleared. And instead of clamping down and shutting down all the restaurants, let the individual proprietors decide. Some of them may make unwise decisions. I think most of them won't, because there's a very effective credit rating mechanism called reputation in a free market system, and that's the way I think it would work. And that's what they're doing in Korea. And certain stores in Korea have signs outside that say no mask, no entry. Some have closed all the way, and some are open for better or worse.
So instead of just shutting down bars and restaurants, would it make more sense to say something like, we're going to take your temperature at the door, and we're going to have, we're going to hire somebody who's going to look at you, and if you have any symptoms, we're just not going to let you in. We're going to space the tables apart. Would that be a better system, you think, than just shutting everything down, which is going to lead to people going somewhere else?
That would be more consistent with liberty. That would be more consistent, or that would be more towards keeping the economy vibrant. And also, that's the thing, is like these companies, whether it's a walk-in restaurant or whether it's a sports arena or something. They have to have the right to say no for whatever reason. No, you can't come in. You refuse the test. You pass the test, but you look ill anyway. They have the right to say no, and I think Americans have become very entitled to be able to go wherever they want. Yeah,
you'd have to almost say there'd be no lawsuits as a result of this either. You can't sue 6 months down the road for discrimination because they didn't let you in because you refused to get your temperature scanned or something like that.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. Great points, Pete. There always is a way when we just believe in freedom and liberty versus government. There always is a way to do the right thing, and South Korea proves it. South Korea preserved the open society, and now infection rates are falling. I'll post a link to this, Pete, and come back on the show. It's great stuff.
I would love to. Thanks a lot, Rich.